So let's end by talking about applications of linear functions. So we're going to talk about linear functions, how they are modeled and solved when they're given in the form of a model application problem. So here's our first one. Using data and projections from 1990 through 2050, the percent of Hispanics in the U.S. population can be modeled by the function that you see right here. So the first question asks, what's the slope? So recall that when we have y equals mx plus b, the slope is what sits next to the x variable. So our slope here is 0.224. And also recall that we're going to put that over 1 if we don't see it as a fraction. So it tells us that each year, okay, so if we write that 0.224 over 1, that's our year. For each 1 year, the population goes up by 0.224. Here's another one. A company produces and sells a smartphone with a revenue function given here and a cost function that's given here, where X is the number of smartphones produced and sold. What is the marginal revenue? Well, marginal revenue, or marginal, is another fancy word for slope. So you're going to be asked sometimes for the marginal value or maybe fixed costs. Fixed costs would be your y-intercept. So the marginal revenue we're going to come up here to the revenue function, is 89.50. So that means $89.50 per phone is made. The next question asks us to find the profit. So you need to know that profit is always the revenue, whatever you make, minus whatever it costs you to actually create the product. So we're going to take the 89.50x and we're going to subtract from it that entire cost function, 54.36x plus the 6790. And we'll go ahead and simplify it. So our profit equation, P of x, is going to be 35.14x minus 6790. Remember that you need to distribute that negative sign to each thing inside of those parentheses. So the $35.14 is our marginal profit. And that tells us how much we actually make in profit off of each phone. Let's look at one last one together. The marriage rate per 1,000 unmarried women for the years 1987 to 2014 is given by, and we're given an equation, where x represents the number of years since 1980. This is a nice review of x and y intercepts. So to find the x-intercept, you let y equals 0. And I always sometimes tell people to imagine just taking your thumb and covering up whatever you see next to the y. So we have 132x equals 9570, and we'll go ahead and solve that for x. That gives us x equals 72.5. And then it says find and interpret the y-intercept. So we'll go through the same sort of thing, except now we're going to let x equal 0. Cover up the 132x with your hand. You end up with 1000y equals 9570. And we'll divide both sides by 1,000. So we know that y equals 9.57. So what does that mean? So that's where x is 0, and x was the number of years since 1980. So in 1980, the marriage rate per 1,000 women was 9.57. I want you to go ahead and do a couple of the practice problems that have been interspersed throughout, do all of the ones that have been interspersed throughout, and then go ahead and give your homework a try.